Hey there, welcome to Beauty and the Pom podcast. I'm Kiani Mills.
And I'm Andy Reid.
Two friends who have a very similar set of values, but who have taken very different life paths to end up in similar situations.
We are also business owners, parents, property enthusiasts, and bloody short on time. So we bring you this podcast to shine a light on humanising business.
Because look, let's face it, business is life, and life is business.
Welcome back to Beauty and the Pom. This is an interesting episode for me, Kiani. How are you, by the way?
I just got like this instant flow of excitement and butterflies from your level of energy that came across right then.
I was quite subdued before I kicked into gear, I have to say.
That was incredible. We've got the recording of what he sounded like before that too, so I think we need to weave that in. That was amazing. That was super impressive.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, look, anytime, let's face it, though, anytime I get to speak to someone that's on the top table, it generally makes me feel good, makes me feel like I'm validating myself and my existence just by being in your presence, Key, I have to say. Anyway, interested in this episode because it's a very pertinent topic. We were having a bit of a chat earlier on, team, and this was before we actually looked at our schedule to see what we'd had scheduled in, right? So that goes to show you how much preparation goes into these conversations. And we were both talking about challenges that we had with our kids. And this episode, Key, is all about being a parent to kids and your business, because there's a hell of a lot of comparisons, right?
And it happens all at the same time.
It really, really does. It really, really does. So, Kiani, like before we get stuck into this, like when you think about this topic of being a parent, full stop, what's the sort of stuff that comes through your head?
Yeah, it's I feel like so many people are going to resonate with this. And even if you don't have children, you might have fur babies, or your business might be your baby. It doesn't matter, because I know in my world, my business life and my parent life collided when I had she would have been just 2 years old, walking through the house with one of those like plastic pretendy mobile phones. And I went, "Summer," and she had her hand up to her ear as if she was talking on the phone. And she turns to me, she puts the stop hand in my face and goes, "Wait, Mummy, I'm just on a phone call," and turned around and walked away with the phone in her hand. And I went, "Ooh, how many times have I done that to her for her to then turn around and do that to me? Holy crap. What am I doing? I'm raising a sassy monster."
Oh, look, and it's really interesting when we talk about how much our influences, how much we influence our kids without us even realizing, right?
Man, they're little sponges.
Oh, they are. And the same applies to our businesses, gang, because the energy that we have in our personal lives, whether we like it or not, absolutely spills through into our business lives in a big, big way.
And you know what? That was the perfect example of the way you kicked off this episode. Because if you've got an office, think about the energy that you walk into your office with. If you walk in full of beans and go, "Morning, everybody, how are you?" You just instantly set the tone. But if you walk in, you're like, "Hi, how are you? Yeah, great, awesome." Or nothing at all and walk into your office and slam the door. What exactly do you think you're going to get back? So children are exactly the same. They are our little sponges and our little mini-me's.
They are the reflection of who we are, right? They are
Oh, God, that's scary.
Shit. Like you wouldn't believe. Like you wouldn't believe.
Holy crap.
There's only one person to blame when I think he was, I don't know if he was 2. And the F word starts flowing into our car, and it's not from me, but I know where his F's are coming from, right? It's hilarious, and we talk about influence, and we talk about this in a fun way, but from a business point of view, when we think about it in a bit more of a serious context, right? When we're thinking about how our choices in terms of our energy and our ethos, and you can also refer this to standards within our business. This has been a really key topic recently for me, is how our standards reflect through our businesses, right? So Kiani is, for those of you who don't know, she is a fabulous mum of two, and she does an absolutely incredible job. And I was at her launch event as she changed her brand from KLM through to Imperial. And through your sort of little speech type thing, for want of a better word, you referred to it as, in that sort of family parenting, nurture type sense, right? So I want to break this down into a couple of different sections of business, if this is okay, Kiana. If I can lead, if you would follow.
Come on.
The first thing I want to talk about is the whole when it comes to staff and nurturing. That nurture mentality, and as well as that, we can also branch that out to identifying talent, recruitment, right? And we talk about nature versus nurture and the balance between the two, particularly in the sales side of things. But Kiani, first off, about staff. When it comes to staff, and we talk about being the parents and so on and so forth, what has been your sort of ethos around all of this, and can have you got like an example of where you've either made a huge mistake or a huge error in judgment around it?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the ethos for me sits around lead by example, and it's something that I don't think any individual, especially, when I first started my business, I was still young myself, and I didn't do a business running course or a business management course or anything like that. So I didn't actually understand how much influence I, as an individual, had in that staffing environment. And I didn't understand the whole lead by example mentality. I still had a bit of that, oh, well, I'm the boss, it's fine. Whereas the staff are looking at it going, well, why isn't she doing what we're doing? Like, we're working our asses off here. Why isn't she? And it really showed very, very strongly for me when I looked at through the first few years of business. And I was like, right, I've got to grow. We're getting bigger. We've got more files. Who do I hire? And naturally, who do I need? I need someone like me. So I went looking for someone like me. And I ended up with an office full of socialites who were brilliant face-to-face, who could hold a conversation with anyone, who were fantastic at Friday night drinks, but may not have come back to the office after the Friday afternoon lunch or even on the Monday, and just couldn't necessarily find that work social balance. And I realized that was because they were great at what they did, no questions asked, but they didn't have the same pullback that I had. I'm the business owner. Of course I do. And so through a process of analysis and a fair few bad hires, not bad, just wrong and incorrect for the time hires, I realized that I didn't actually need more of me. I needed those true number whizzes and computer geniuses that were, I don't like to use this term, but like the workhorses who wanted to come in, sit down, smash their job, leave at 5 o'clock, have no worries, or work overtime if they had to. Like, that work ethic was really, really strong, so that they could help me get off the tools so that I could go out and do my superpower, which was that nurturing, networking, referral, those kinds of things. So for me, it showed up really quickly, thank God. And I actually also had a scenario where I hired a friend, and she was probably one of my best friends. It breaks my heart, but that didn't work out very, very well. This was hiring friends is super hard, especially when the roles are so different. My role was very much out and about and socializing, and hers was very much answer the phones, do what the clients need, client services. So that was a really, really tricky one. So I think both of those have given me, I guess, a really good, clear insight as to what I do need and what I don't need, and then really show how important my lead by example is, and to make that clear in the hiring process as well through what is your job, what is my job, what are we doing, what are we not doing, X, Y, and Z. So yeah, a lot of clarity and lead by example.
So just to put a bit of context around it, so how old were you when you started your business?
26.
And how old were the kids?
Summer was 1 and Kobe was 4, just turned 4.
Yeah, okay. So you're very much still in that process, as we all are constantly, but you're very much still in your infancy of being a mum as well,
Yeah.
right? And then you have this newborn business, right?
Mm.
And you know, you're trying to work out, you're trying to find your feet in terms of how the heck you are going to be a parent and nurture this business, much like you were trying to work out how to be a mum to two kids,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Just winging all of it.
How much did you feel that when you were learning these things and you're making these mistakes in business, did you feel that it made you reflect in your home life with your kids?
100%, 100%. There is no way that you can make a mistake at work and not look at how that may be affecting other areas of your life. And not even just the kids, friendships, family. It's amazing when your eyes are opened through most of the time something going wrong, unfortunately, or an uncomfortable conversation or something like that. But it makes you reflect. And in some way, it's almost like a two birds, one stone scenario. If you look at it the right way, you're getting this gorgeous piece of intel that you may not get in your parenting life from business that you can then instantly reuse, put it back in, and get the benefit across everything. Because
Absolutely.
they're not so different.
You're 100%. Yeah, I could not agree more. A very, very recent story, which is something that Kiani and I spoke about offline, was I've just had the first of maybe a few sort of little fingers saying, "Come here," from Eliza's teacher saying, "Come here, we need to have a word." And unfortunately, Eliza had bowed to a little bit of peer pressure with regards to sending some not so nice things, some not so nice messages towards other people in her class. And what you just said rings so true, because after my initial sort of shock and wanting to absolutely just ban her from anything electronic for like 12 years, right? After I've calmed down and reason prevailed, I actually had to think about how I've become way too blasé, way too sort of lackadaisical around the responsibility, the onus that is on kids these days when it comes to how easy they can communicate with people and whatnot, right? I've just made this assumption that, it's part of everyday life. Of course, Eliza's got this kids messenger thing, or she had it, not have it anymore. But she had this kids messenger thing that they had complete freedom to talk to whoever in their class whenever about whatever, right? And the kids just turned 8 now. It's made me really, really reflect on how much I am assuming from a communication and a responsibility point of view with my business, with the way that I go about my work side of things. And it's made me go, you know what? I'm clearly not communicating enough about responsibilities and accountabilities and so on and so forth in my work life. And when we talk about juggling these two arenas, I think it's safe to say that your life is made a heck of a lot easier if you can just have a set of rules and you just work them according to your audience, right? But if you just have one set of rules, I reckon life would be a hell of a lot easier, right?
Absolutely. And you're right, because the expectations that we set shouldn't be depending on, I mean, obviously they're kids. We've got to give them a little bit of a break because they're
For
still
sure.
learning. But in our business life, unfortunately, sometimes we're going to have to deal with kids as well. Sometimes they don't know what they don't know. But as a parent, it is our job to tell them what they don't know. We're not going to catch it all the time. So don't be too hard on yourself, because this is normal. And there is nowhere near enough. I don't know. As I said to you, I feel like there needs to be a communications class specifically for kids at school to teach them how to communicate through electronics, because my assumption is that they just type what they would say out loud, but they don't. They really don't. And I can see it in my kids' messages to me. They go, "Mum, where are you? Mum, where are you?" Or if I'm away for a night, I wake up in the morning, they go, "Can I have a blah?" And I'm like, "Morning, I'm great.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking." Like, where's the pleasantries? It's like they've forgotten how to communicate through pleasantries. But look, as I said, I think give yourself a break, because we're humans and they don't know any different. But I think part of that juggle is that leading by example and taking responsibility for what we can control, so that then the people around us, staff, colleagues, children, can then learn by watching, which is the way that our kids learn. And we're hopefully not passing down too many of our bad habits, and they're watching all the good ones just as much as the bad ones.
Now, on that communication piece, because it's just made me think from a segue point of view, I also feel, right, and this again, part of my reflection, I also feel that we take for granted that anybody that's coming into our business, so a new member of staff, for example, or a new hire if you're outsourcing or what have you, the volume of assumptions that we make around, how we like to be communicated with, I reckon there wouldn't be a business owner that is listening to this, right, that hasn't made the mistake of not telling new staff how you like to be communicated with, to, right? And it sounds so simple. And I'm even thinking about onboarding processes right as we speak that I've been helping people implement and whatnot. And how many times do we end up getting, or do people end up getting in bother, or do you get riled by someone or riled by your kids because you haven't explained to them how you would like to be communicated, right? So for example, take the pleasantries thing. I'm a stickler for courtesy, right? I'm an absolute.
You're very polite, especially for a male. Not that males aren't, but you are considerate and polite.
I can't handle it. Courtesy does my nut. If you haven't got it, then that's me turned off. But I assume, like a lot of the time, we assume like that our kids or our staff have a level of courtesy that's akin to mine because I've hired them, for example, and ergo I have recognized that they will have a same sort of mentality around things like courtesy and so on and so forth. But and a lot of the time those conversations can feel a little bit awkward, right? But if we don't have those conversations, then we run the risk of having a way bigger crash down the other end. And I think when you what you mentioned then about understanding that they don't know what they don't know, I think within everybody's onboarding process, I think there needs to be not a get to know, like go and have a drink on a Friday, to know your staff. That's bullshit, sort of stupid corporate nonsense that holds no value whatsoever. But actually do a get to know exercise. How we like to be communicated, what language we like to be communicated with. I've been getting into a good habit a lot more recently. Well, I've been saying to anybody that I'm coaching and training, look, if you want to get hold of me, just send me an SMS or send me a one-line email. Don't worry about pleasantries because you might forget what you want to say. Just bang it on one sentence and hit send. Don't even have to put in a subject if you don't want to. Just hit send, right? Because for me right now, in where I am in what I'm doing, I don't really want, and it's kind of oxymoronic, right? Because I really like the courtesy, but when it comes to giving me information, courtesy, just give me the information.
Have you ever done the DISC profile?
Oh yeah, and I keep switching.
Are you a D? Are you a D and an I?
I change depending on what cycle I'm in from a mental health point of view.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That plays a huge part.
Yep.
And partly when I'm in that sort of fuck it mode. I think there is such a thing as fuck it mode where where I throw caution to the wind, and it's one of those ones where I start swinging my arms and just go windmilling in.
There was this really cool program or platform or whatever I implemented in the business about 3 years ago. And every one of my staff, once they are, we do the onboarding, the interview process, and they become a staff member. And part of the onboarding process is they complete a Gallup assessments, and it assesses your strengths from 1 to 34. And based on that, you have a representative that kind of pulls apart the report, what it means, and then it puts it into a company chart. So they then verbal diarrhea to you how that person would like to be communicated with, what their strong points are, what their weaknesses are, what their language skills are, whether they're auditory, visual, kinesthetic, whatever it might be. Then they put into a team dynamic and go, how do they work in a team? And it delivers based on your team, where everyone's skill set sits. And as a manager, I can deliver to them how I appreciate communication, but I then too go into our relationship knowing the best way to communicate with them to get the most effective results and the most, I guess, purpose-driven outcomes, which was a really cool thing for me because, you know, as a baby in business, I told you I had no idea what I was doing. I just hired people like me. But this was a really cool tool, and it wasn't overly expensive. And it was almost, to me, I looked at it as it was an investment in that staff member, because it's awareness that they get about themselves as well. Because they get this report read back to them and they're like, oh, I do that. Oh my gosh, I do that. And we're looking at strengths and weaknesses. The idea isn't it that we're bad at these things. It's that, well, in order for us to thrive up here, we have to have some things at the bottom. And tell me if you're surprised by this or not. My top 5 strengths was self-belief, harmony, responsibility, assertive, and activator. And then my last strength, my very, very bottom strength, was empathy.
Really? Actually, no, I can see that. I can see. All right, now, don't take that as a swipe that I feel you are just not empathetic in any way, shape, or form. Because you are. But I think people need to get to know you in order to understand how you convey empathy, right?
Yes. That's a very good way of looking at it. So that I looked at it and I was like, oh my gosh, no way, this thing's wrong. And then it got explained to me that I have sympathy, right? I can sympathize with anybody and feel bad for them for being in that situation. Sympathy is an external emotion. Empathy is internal. Empathy is me. I can imagine being in your shoes. That's the part that I can't. Not that I can't do it. It's that in my travels and in my journey and in my life, there's been a lot of situations where in order to get out of a certain situation, you have to do something and you have to take a next step. You have to, even if that next step isn't even forwards, it might be sidewards or it might even be backwards. Who knows? But it's always about movement. So my empathy struggles with the stuckness of situations, I suppose. So if someone's coming forwards and moving, then great. I've got so much empathy. I can put myself in their position. I can help them move. But it's when they're stuck in their spots. Anyway, that's totally off topic.
But I'll tell you what, that is going to be a topic, right? But if we bring that back to a leadership, business ownership point of view, and it kind of relates to the last thing that I really wanted to talk about, because it's all well and good saying that you want to build your castle, right? But you'll have people within your business that will invariably look at the level of ambition that you have and want to have a piece of that action, right? And then that's where we have this juxtaposed sort of thought process of, this human is clearly a rock star, but hold on, my P&L might well suffer if I nurture this rock star into the megastar that I feel that they could be, right? And there's that sort of, and I think there's a real conflict going on there, right? Where you can empathize because you can see yourself in them, in the respect of, you can see that they've got that desire, that bulldog, that sort of want to really sort of excel as a human being. But you quite like your business running well at the same time, and they contribute towards that. Yeah. So how, when we talk about empathy in this context around parenting and nurturing talent and so on and so forth, how do you, because you've got plenty of staff kicking around, right? And you've done really, really well, and everybody that tends to be engaged with you, from what I've seen and who I have met, tends to flourish, unless you're just hiding the shit ones away from me. I'm not sure. Maybe you are. I don't know. When we come to that conflict of being empathetic versus making sure that your business is a success, because it's kind of like your business is a kid, but then your staff are kids. How do you sort of
Look, I don't know if there's any golden answer to it. I think going into it, and again, I keep coming back to this mental thing. Not every staff member is going to stay with you forever, but no relationship should ever, and I take this across every area of my life. I mean, there are going to be people out there that hate me. I have no doubt about that. I believe that a relationship is worth salvaging regardless of the circumstances. I believe in forgiveness, and I believe that if that staff member is not suited for you, then perhaps they are better suited elsewhere. And it's not that you've failed or they've failed. It's a bit like a relationship. It didn't work. But if you go into the mindset with, and one of the things that I've seen talking about that empathetic about the way that that person is then the boss or the owner who is then feels threatened by their potential success. So puts the lid on them to strategically keep them where they are so they can keep that shining light. And it is an interesting world that we live in, but I honestly think, if the staff aren't right for you, if you're not right for the staff, then invite them to be successful elsewhere. But there's no reason to be holding grudges or holding people back, or like, let people flourish. But as a good business owner, you should have a business plan and you should know where you're going. So if they're on the journey with you and they're in there for the ride, then great, they're going to stay and we're going to make it work. But yeah, I don't know. That's a bit of a tricky one. I don't know if I answered that.
Oh, look, you can kind of relate it from the parenting point of view with respect to allowing, and neither of us are at that stage just yet. Invariably, that situation where you need to let your kids go, right? You need to let your kids fly the coop. And, you can either resent the fact that they, either don't want to be, with you all the time, or the fact that they've got that level of independence that you've become so accustomed to them needing dependency for, having that dependency on you, right? Ego,
there you go. Yeah, there you
go. Ego, versus understanding when it's the right time to protect them from X, Y, and Z, right? Yeah. I really like what you mentioned there very briefly about the fact that you can't, at the end of the day, we would love everybody to care as much as we do, but ultimately they won't, right? Yeah. And it's the same when it comes to a childminder looking after your kids, right? You hope that they care for your kids as much as you do, but at the end of the day, they won't. And I think one thing that you identified there that I think really is worth highlighting, understanding that ultimately your business is your baby. You have staff members that you pay to look after your baby, but ultimately it is your baby and not theirs. And you can't expect them to want to look after your baby as much as you do, and to care and love for your baby as much as you do.
Yeah, and that's one of the first things that I learned through my business performance consultants was you're going to have to learn to be okay with 80%. And that was probably the hardest thing for me to let go of until I hired the right people for the right roles, for the right purposes. The 80% turned into 150% because I did it better than I ever could.
Spot on. And you know what? If you can hire 4 people that provide you with 80% commitment, then the accumulative net gain is going to be absolutely incredible, as opposed to managing to find a couple of people that may want to love your business and 90 or 100%, and you'll probably end up feeling intruded upon if they get to that level, right? Because hold on, this is my kid, not yours. Sort of.
Yeah, I know, totally. But hey, I've got a question for you, and this is I don't know if it's sexist, I hope it's not, but I know that as a parent and as a business owner, I suffer really badly of mummy guilt. Like, it kills me to tears. That story you were telling us about Eliza, like, I know that situation has absolutely happened before to us, and I think it's like a child's initiation process. They have to unfortunately learn that not everybody has your best interests at heart, and that unfortunately people are going to think, behave and be different to who we are. But my instant reaction when that's happened is I've gone, oh shit, I'm a bad parent. What could I do better? What have I missed? What have I done wrong? I'm ruining my child's life. Tell me what it felt like on your side. Does daddy guilt exist? Like, what did that manifest to?
The first reaction that I had, which I sort of alluded to very briefly before, was, for want of a better word, shame. Partly partly because of the fact that it sounded like Eliza was bullying members of her class via this messenger app thing. And having been bullied myself considerably, that cut deep, right?
Wow.
That cut deep. And the first thing I felt was a bit of shame. Then the next thing that I felt was, it wasn't, geez, I'm a really, really bad parent, but it did make me consider how much I've assumed about how well I have taught Eliza, or how much I've assumed with respect to how much of me is in her.
Yeah,
right.
Interesting.
Which was an interesting little one, that one.
Because isn't that funny? Because as we've spoken about, the spongeness, how much of those inbuilt traits that maybe aren't verbal are in our children.
Absolutely. And inbuilt values, right? So because our values are natural, and we assume that our kids, and then in business, we assume that our staff will hold true to those values, that they are completely bought into those values, when ultimately, if they're not, then whose fault's that?
Yep.
Now, I didn't go as far as to say that I'm a really bad parent or a really bad dad, but it certainly made me reflect on how I can better communicate things like social accountability and responsibility to an 8-year-old, right?
I think that says a lot about you as a person, though. You're very reflective. I know that there's a lot of people out there who would have instantly gone to throw it out, and it must be someone else's fault, or it must be, they must be lying, or whatever it might be. Whereas I get that and appreciate this in you, that you are such an internal creature, and seeing it, and shame and guilt sit side by side. So I think the answer to the do daddies get mummy guilt, daddy guilt, from that description, I'd say yes.
Yeah, I reckon now you sort of mention it like that. I think we do. Don't get me wrong though. If you'd have been speaking to me, I reckon 3 or 4 iterations ago, 3 or 4 evolutions ago, one of the prick things of me back in the day was my ability, or lack, my unfortunate capacity to react.
You're human. Don't forget that.
And I think if you'd have spoken to me about this a little while ago, then how I handled it would have been a lot different. A hell of a lot different. And initially, how I initially wanted to handle it was very, very different. I think the words that I said to the teacher was, she'll be playing with an abacus for the next 10 years, right? Because she ain't getting her iPad back. But I think the opportunity that I gave myself to just stop for a second and have a think about, my own mistakes, and, bowing to peer pressure and whatnot. And I asked her, the first thing I said to her was, I said, look, you know why we're having a chat, right? And she started to try and, not justify, but sort of make excuse. And I said, look, first thing I want to know is, do you know that what you did was wrong? And she went, yeah. And she started tearing up and whatnot. And I said, and she said, yeah, but, I felt pressured. The person that she was with, apparently she almost cried if she didn't send these nasty messages, blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah, but ultimately, darling, it doesn't matter if someone convinces you to rob a bank. If you get busted robbing a bank, you can end up in jail. And I think, and this is, again, there's a bit of an empathy piece here, having bowed to peer pressure myself, right?
I think we all have. Let's just make a premise here. We have all bowed to peer pressure.
Of course we have. But I think that we need to be mindful when it comes to our businesses that if there are bad energies or bad situations that come about between staff or through a collusion of staff or whatever it is, I think we need to be careful. We don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I think that we need to, and this is my ethos around it, is everybody's allowed to make a mistake, right? The thing that's going to really piss me off is if you start making the same mistake.
Yes, I'm exactly the same.
Exactly. If you keep making the same mistake, then we're going to start having problems.
Yeah, there's something terribly wrong here. But I think the thing I loved the most when we spoke about, what happened with Eliza especially, was when you said that for you, and I totally agree as a parent, it's the how did that make you feel? And she said to you that it didn't make her feel great. And so sometimes when, especially with children, the why doesn't actually even really matter. The why is giving them an opportunity to blame someone else. The real core of it is, how did it make you feel? Because if they can feel that in their body, they will remember that. And if they are intelligent little humans like Eliza definitely is, as I said to you, like the fact that she's learning this at such a young age is going to be beneficial for her. Some kids don't learn this until high school, and high school's a pretty full-on place. So the fact that she's learning it at such a young age and can feel that, number one, it's wrong and that it didn't feel good to do, she's so less likely to go and do it again. And I think that's the important part too, is that if we put it back onto how did you feel, when they feel that again, they're going to be less inclined to do it because they know what happened last time, as opposed to a, you know, as you said, you know, maybe the consequence is you lose your iPad. Oh, okay, great. I'll lose my iPad. I'll watch the TV instead. Or, you know, kids have always got something to replace it with. It doesn't mean anything. But when that feeling kicks in, it's it's a lot. And I think it relevant with staff as well.
Oh, absolutely. And the parallels are uncanny to a conversation I had with a sales agent that I've been collaborating with for a while now, and they've just picked up an incredible accolade, you know, being the number one salesperson in a really large franchise network in the state. And a couple of weeks before, he said to me, he called me up. And he goes, and he was starting, I could hear there was some doubt in his voice. And he goes, Andy, like, I've been told that, you know, I need to be auctioning everything. Right. And he goes, and I'm sure, you know, and he goes, and I'm sure you probably agree, but I'm not, I don't know. And I went, mate, hold on. If you were to go into every one of your listings and you know, with that predetermined notion of, I have to auction this, how's that going to make you feel? Yeah, because I said, mate, you know, it's not sitting right because you know it doesn't feel right. And if it doesn't feel right, then it's not right.
And then too, in that moment, you know, it's got nothing to do with him. It's got to do with what is then verbally to the customer. Because
exactly.
There's something in his little internal compass that's saying, no, it's not right. It's not right for every single customer to go to auction.
Yeah, and more to the point, he knows, because he's damn good at what he does, and he's such a good connector with human. Like, he's a ripper lad, really top. Like, got so much time. He knows that if he goes in to any appointment with a set agenda, he isn't going to be true to himself with the advice that he gives, and he's not going to have the customer as the most important person.
I love that.
And that's what fucked him. That's what was screwing with him. And I said to him, mate, look, if you speak to 10 homeowners and after you've listened to them, 9 of them you're thinking should go to auction, that's because your intention is having their best interests at heart. Winner, man, wicked. And that might be the case, but it is absolutely ridiculous of us to think that we know what's best when we haven't even spoken to the most important person in the transaction, is the consumer, right? It's a bit like a doctor prescribing the same medicine to 10 patients before they've heard the symptom. You're probably going to make 6 or 7 of them, you know, feel better. There's probably going to be 3 or 4 that are probably going to have a real adverse effect.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And that to me sounds like someone who has his values set across all. That moral compass does not waver from home life to business life to family life to friends life. That sounds pretty solid.
It's taken a bit to get him there.
Oh my gosh, it's definitely not easy.
It's taken him a bit to get there. Like, we're not preaching. I really want to make mention. We're not preaching because we were born, we came out of the womb, and all of a sudden we were like this. Like I said, I used to be a prick for overreacting. That impatient part of me, that, you know, kind of like yourself, Kiani, right? When you know, I'm an action guy, like, less talk, more action. But if we're to really truly connect, we've got to understand and learn how to go back into third gear. If that's the only gear that they can get up to, the person that's on the other side of the table, or your sales, your sales member, staff member, or your team member, or whoever it is, if they can only get into second or third gear, then how the hell are they supposed to follow you if you're constantly in top gear, right? You're just going to race away from it. And then you're screwed, because you're going to be really lonely because they're going to be miles away from you. This is something that is learned.
And it brings me back to, like, the the mimicking, the sponging of the kids, and how much they watch us and how much they take from us. And it is similar, you know, this sales agent, he's worked in a great company. He's watched people do it well. He's watched people do it not so well. He's trained, got mentors. He's doing all the right things. It's just, I guess, when we are in that role of maybe we're not yet the parent, but we're on our way to the parent. It's who we surround ourselves with, and you know, our children, we are their guiding light. So we have to hold ourselves to a certain esteem. But you know, your example was perfect around that individual just runs on 100 all the time. And I know as parents, that's kind of what we do, especially with our kids and our staff. We don't let them in so much on the struggles. We don't let them in so much on the nights where we cry, or when we're worrying about paying wages, or those kinds of things. So my question to you is, are we raising more business owners? Are we raising a future of business owners? Or are we making it look too hard because we're hiding all the reality of it? And it looks as though I know from my kids, as I said, my daughter, you're on the phone all the time. You're never away from your computer. Can you please pay us some attention? And the staff, it's the same thing. You're constantly working 24/7. Like, do I want to take this burden on? What are we doing?
I think this, you know, it kind of, you sort of relate it to, you know, the Insta fame, the Insta success, and so on and so forth that is put out there. And I think that a lot of the vernacular around it is sort of, like I said, equal and opposite reaction. I think a lot of people are really keen on, you know, because they want to be seen as a point of difference. They want to be seen as the, you know, the true voice and blah, blah, blah. And they bitch and moan about all the shit stuff, right? Like way too much. I think the real critical piece that needs to come into play now that we're sort of, you know, we've swung hard the other way. Now I think that we need to start to find this balance whereby, yes, there are absolutely some tough times and tough conversations, but anything worth having requires effort. And there are, you know, things that, you know, need to be paid for, whether it is financially, mentally, spiritually, physically, energy, you know, from an energy point of view. But I think if we can really put that to those that do want to be a business owner, that as long as you can justify in that moment to yourself that whatever it is you're looking at is worth paying the price for, then cool. Whether it is effort, financial, whatever it is, if the sacrifice is worth the reward, if you get there and it's not guaranteed, then it's worth a punt. And I think this is probably where we need to start having a bit more of a chat around this whole balance of, yes, there's some good times. Yes, there's some shit times. But as long as the average works out all right for you, worth doing it.
Yeah, I agree. So do you think you're raising little entrepreneurs?
With my kids, I reckon.
Yeah.
Because my son, he's already talking about wanting to get a job, and he's 4.
I love that.
Which is wicked.
So much. He can come work for me anytime.
Oh, no, look, no. I'm already going to, child labour. There's going to be a lot in my neck of the woods. But Eliza, it was interesting. When it wasn't long before COVID hit, right? So she'd have been 5, and she wanted to do a lemonade stand, right? And I'm like, sweet, happy to help. You know, let's set up a Facebook page. We'll do that. We'll properly give it a crack. So if you're going to do it, let's do a little budget. Right, and we'll go to Bunnings and we'll see how much it costs per cup so that you know what to charge, and we're doing all this sort of stuff, right? And it was annoying that COVID hit and we ended up not being able to follow through with it. But when we were first talking about it, and I said, okay, darling, so I just want to know, why do you want to make money? Is it for yourself or is it for charity? What is it? And she quite, you know, unashamedly said, it's for myself. And I went, that's all right. Why? And she said, because then I can buy things that I want. And I'm like, fair enough, darling.
Yeah.
And because of her honesty and all that sort of stuff, I was like, right. And I promised her. I said, right, okay. Every dollar that you make, I'll match it. And like I said, it was a shame that we couldn't go through with it because of good old Uncle COVID. But I think we need to learn to let go when it comes to our staff around this whole, you know, I don't want them stealing some of my business and so on and so forth, right? From an auctioneering point of view.
I agree. There is enough out there for everybody.
Yeah. And I love nothing more than seeing entrepreneurs really kick on.
Oh, raise them up. This is honestly, as I say, exactly the same. If I bring anyone into my company, I leave them better than they were before I got them. And whether they take those skills to another conveyancing firm or open their own firm, good on them. At least I know there are more people out there in the industry who work with the same ethics and the same values and the same process that I do. So great. I'd love to come up against them so that we can work together, because to me, that is the end goal, is getting our industry in line with practitioners who know what they're doing, who do it compliantly, and work in with the banks and the other major players. So honestly, really, as I said, there is enough out there for everybody. If you behave with that scarcity mindset, and I think that's what it is, you will put a glass ceiling on your capabilities and you'll put a glass ceiling on others. But if you can come from that absolute abundance mindset where there is enough for everybody, if you are to be successful elsewhere, you go and do it, and you give them everything you possibly can until that day comes where they either leave you to go and do something else or go and spread their wings and do it themselves. What a great feeling. Not everything has to end being traumatic or terrible or...
Absolutely.
People
Absolutely. It's like the coaching. It's like when I talk about coaching, and this is where there is an incredible parallel with parenting, because ultimately you want to coach sales staff or whoever. You want to coach yourself out of a job.
Yes, 100%.
And likewise with your kids, you want to parent yourself out of a job.
You want to leave those little fuckers as self-sufficient, as responsible, and as polite as possible.
Exactly. And if you're parent yourself out of a job because of all of that sort of stuff Kiani said, and likewise with your staff, if you can lead them and coach them to a point where they don't need you, then you're doing all right.
You've done an amazing job. Amazing job. Hey, I reckon that's probably a good place to wrap it up. But before we do, I think I'd like to take a minute and on behalf of our listeners, what you did right there, telling that story about Eliza and being so honest, that is courageous. There is not many men that I know that would come on to a live podcast recording and openly have a conversation like that. So I absolutely applaud you and thank you for being the human you are. But that shame that you felt, that courage is 10 times stronger. So know that you're doing the right thing even just by saying it out loud. So thank you.
Oh, look, we'll keep swinging, right? We'll not hit every time, but every so often we'll get a home run, right?
That's
we'll
right.
Keep swinging.
That's awesome. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for tuning in today. It's been a great chat, as always, talking about parenting, both our businesses and our children and each other along the way. I think we counsel each other just as much.
Big time.
But we love it. So please give us your feedback. Reach out on socials. We are trying very hard to push our social media at the moment. So if you think someone needs to hear what we're talking about, please share it. And if you'd like us to talk about something that is important to you, please send us a DM and we will get back to you. Peace out, guys.
Take it easy, gang.
Thank you so much for joining us. We are very grateful for your time and we really hope that we've provided some value.
Follow us on Instagram if you've liked what you've heard, and if you have anything that you want us to talk about, things that might have been bugging you but you've not quite had the bottle to really bring it out into the open, send us a DM and we'll happily bring it to the table.